Well, welcome to Juniper Level Botanic Gardens. This is the brainchild of Tony Avent. You've come here to the nursery to buy plants, and that's very good of you, because the Juniper Level Botanic Gardens could not exist if you did not buy plants here at Plant Delight's Nursery. 15% of the sales, what's gained through that, goes into the creation and maintenance of this botanic garden. So this is essentially Tony Avent's private botanical garden developed through the years that is open to the public on certain days of the year, and you get to enjoy it. But if you think about the price of the plants that you're paying for here, just remember you're going in support of what you see here, and there are lots and lots of rare plants and lots of beautiful landscapes. So I want you to know that right off the bat. Though we're going to talk about hardy palms. Did you know that North Carolina has twice as many native species of palms as California? You think I'm lying? Who thinks I'm lying? California only has one native species of palm. All the other ones they've brought in and are growing there, and they do great, but they only have one native species. It's named for George Washington. It's called Washingtonia. That's the genus Phylifera. It's a desert palm growing in wet canyons. North Carolina has two native palms, and we'll see quite a few of them today. One is called Sable Miner. That's the cold hardiest palm in the world. And the other one occurs at Bald Head Island, the northernmost population of Sable palmetto, which you'll know as the state tree of South Carolina. You see it on all the license plates. If we include South Carolina in our geographic area, we now have two more species to add: Serenoa repens, the saw palmetto, and Rhapidophyllum hystrix, the needle palm, and it's equally hardy as Sable Miner. So we have in the Carolinas 4 times as many native species of palms as all of California. There's another reason to grow the Sable Miner and Rhapidophyllum hystrix. Besides the fact that they're native, they do a great job supporting bees. When they flower, they're covered by bees and native wasps and butterflies. So they're great for that, and they also have small seeds that feed the birds in the autumn. So if you're looking for an evergreen architectural plant for the landscape that can grow in sun or part shade, in somewhat dry conditions or very damp conditions, something extremely easy, Sable is the answer. It's extremely easy, and it supports the wildlife. So let's walk around and have a look at some of the palms in the landscape. You know that we've had lots of rain recently, so we're going to walk through areas of the garden that are more accessible and have been prepared for us today.
Excuse me, I gotta ask you about your accent.
Everybody wants to know about my accent.
Subtle, but
my accent,
I love that.
if you think about it as a boat, a lot of people have their accents where they grew up. It just sticks. It's like a boat that's put its anchor down and that's it. Mine hasn't done that. It wanders. So wherever I go, it changes. And so you'll hear all kinds of things and I don't even realize it. But it's like a boat that's weighed its anchor and it's just gone. So that's the best explanation I can give you.
That's a non-answer.
Yes.
Is the windmill one of these? The windmill?
An excellent question. The question is the windmill palm, is that a native palm? It is not native, but it is very cold hardy. And we'll see those as well. It's native to, it's called the Tucson Palm because it came from an area of China. It also occurs in India and what used to be Burma, Manipur. But it is very hardy. It's leaf hardy to about 6 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's a beautiful, fast-growing, trunking palm. And we'll see one just here on the right. So the kind gentleman who just asked the question, thank you. Here, where the waterfalls are behind, we have two beautiful Trachycarpus fortunii. Now this is a beautiful palm. It'll grow if you give it some sun, water, about an inch of water a week, just like you would a fescue lawn, and fertilizer about like a fescue lawn. It'll grow a foot a year, a foot of trunk a year. And
Up to about what?
what height?
Yes.
It'll keep going. I saw in Treba gardens in the United Kingdom, ones that were over 100 years old, and they were 53 feet tall. So,
My lifetime.
right, but a foot a year, I mean, in 8 years you can have one 8 feet tall.
Right.
Yeah. Alas, I checked, we do not have any of these for sale at the moment.
But the watering and the sun and all that, that's and the food that you give it, that's strict. That's pretty strict. You have to do that, or can you let it go after?
No, well, the question is do you have to fertilize it? Do you have to give it that water? And that's a great question, because the answer is no. It'll just grow more slowly, but it will. I've planted seeds in the woodland behind my house, which is loblolly pines and a pH 5.4 soil. Without amendment, they still grow, but more slowly, and they compete well with the pines and the native deciduous trees and slowly grow. That's how they do in habitat. They grow in woodlands and open woodlands. But if you want it to grow quickly, regular water and regular fertilizer during the growing season, they jump on it. But if you don't, they're very durable and can just withstand our conditions here.
So the fertilizer would go as a powder, as a fertilizer around the bottom of the tree?
Whatever fertilizer you're comfortable to use. I use slow release fertilizer because fertilizer is salt, essentially. Fertilizers are essentially salts. They're water-soluble salts that help the plant. But if you over-fertilize it, it's like over-salting, and you can damage the roots. So either you need to be very good at applying liquid fertilizer if you use it, or non-slow-release fertilizer, because there's always a danger. If it doesn't receive enough water, they call it burning the plant, but what you're doing is killing parts of the roots so that they can't absorb water and help the tree or the plant out. So slow release fertilizer is the safest fertilizer to use for plant growth, unless you're extremely good at it and you're careful to make sure they're getting enough water.
You cannot mix the fertilizer into the water and then water it?
No, the granules just go around the plant. Yeah. That's a very good question. So Trachycarpus fortunii, and then right after, look out behind you, low. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
But here, in a very difficult location, a Sable Miner. This is our native plant. In more sun, it would get much, much larger. It would get 6 feet tall, the leaves would be. But evergreen, just like this, right through the winter. So you have something to look at year-round. And that's the wonderful thing about it, is in winter a lot of times your garden can feel weak, a little bit like the season's gone and you're almost in mourning, you just can't wait for spring. But if you use the evergreen palms, you can design your garden to be interesting throughout the year. And this is a very good time to design your garden in the winter, because if you get it right in the winter, it's going to look good throughout the year. So this is the time of the year to look at your garden, see where it's a little bit weak, find the plant that's going to make you happy in winter, and it'll carry you through the year. And if you do that, please consider the native palms and the non-native palms. And the reason to consider non-native palms, I've got an interesting story for you. Have you heard of the Cedar of Lebanon? Well, in Lebanon, the species almost went extinct. With all the wars that were going on through all the years there, they were down to 15 plants in Lebanon. So wow. But you know what saved it? For for hundreds of years, they planted it in Britain. So they got the seeds, took them to Britain, grew them. So they had 10 to 12,000 plants in Britain, so they can restock it with the genetic diversity that Britain has maintained by planting a non-native plant. So if you want a plant to survive, share it. Don't draw too many hard lines about is it native or not, because by sharing plants, you're increasing the likelihood that that plant is going to survive catastrophe in its native realm, and you may be able to help it out later. I do like our native plants, and we should use them. We should not be native blind, but nor should we draw too hard of a line, because by sharing plants, we can save them.
Can I ask a question? So that it doesn't look odd in the landscape. I know I understand the native plant, but odd in the landscape as like a tropical versus what you would have. What would you recommend companion plants around the home like that?
Well, that's a very good question, and I would turn it back into it's all in the person's perspective. And I find it difficult to answer the question because I don't find them odd. I love them. I use them as you would, you've heard of a palm alley where you just have palm, palm, palm. I use a Sable Miner like that in the landscape. It gives me a really long view. And so it's that architecture, you can use it to be very striking. But in the summertime, in another area where I have Sable Letonia, which we can talk about in a minute, I have that underplanted. It's in the sun in the gravel mixed with compost. And I have it underplanted with Rhodophylla and schoolhouse lilies and Zephyranthes, rain lilies, to give you that color. And they also look very good with daffodils around them. And so that can give you the late winter color, the early spring color. And using all of those, you can have a transition of color through the year all the way to autumn. But that's in a sunny position. In the shaded position, you could use, right there you have the mondo grass, which would look good underneath it.
And ferns as well?
And ferns, if you choose an evergreen fern, many of the Diroptera species are evergreen. They look good around it. If you like flowers, you could do hellebores. So there are many, many choices. You just have to suit your eye. You're the painter in your landscape. I'm just trying to get you to think about the uses of this. Yeah.
Do the native palms handle the salt air of, say, the North Carolina coast?
Yes, the question is, do the native palms handle salt air? The answer is yes. It's a great question. They actually have to survive inundation of seawater. Just think when the storms come up along our coast with that giant storm surge, with the hurricanes, it completely inundates them. And yes, they can handle that. So that's another thing that makes them very resilient. And Sable Miner is leaf hardy to at least 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So it has to be extremely cold for you to lose the evergreen architecture of Sable Miner.
How much shade?
The question is, how much shade do they tolerate? Sable Miner, you can see it's underneath this evergreen tree here. It hardly gets direct sun at all, and it survives. If you put it in full sun, if we had it instead out here where that agave is, it'd be very happy and actually grow larger, because sun is giving it energy, and it'll grow larger and faster the more sun it gets. So, but it will survive in the shade.
Because I didn't even realize ferns and those would go together.
Yes, it's extremely versatile. And in Texas, I have seen photos of Sable Miner growing in the open with cacti. So once it gets established, it's very resilient. I just want to take you on a quick loop. I just want to walk through the landscape and let you see the different palms here, because I want to get you to a dramatic specimen of needle palm, and a palm that's extremely rare in North Carolina. I only know of one, and it's in this garden, and it's about to flower, and I want to show you that. It's the miniature Tucson palm, Trachycarpus nanus. It's that tall. It's fantastic. So Tony has designed the landscape so that it has winter interest. So if you look around, there's always something to look at. We have Trachycarpus fortunii from Bulgaria. We have 2 of them there. That's a fantastic plant with shorter, stiffer leaves. It's better able to handle snow loads, and it grows in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, if you can imagine that. And just behind the pond, just past it, underneath the shade of the hollies, is a needle palm, Rhipidophyllum hystrix. It's leaf hardy to 5 degrees Fahrenheit and has survived minus 20 degrees. Not here, but in other locations, in Oklahoma, minus 20 degrees. Sable Miner, same thing. It can defoliate and come right back. So once you get it going, you're not going to lose it. Another nice example here. And Sable Miner occurs throughout the southeast. So the northernmost location of Sable Miner is on Monkey Island, just south of the Virginia border. And it occurs from there all the way down to Florida, along the coast, through Texas, and actually into parts of Mexico. And in Mexico, it hybridized with a plant called Sable mexicana and gave us this large leaf plant here, which is Sable Tamaulipas from Tamaulipas, Mexico, and its origin was in hybridization. It is leaf hardy again to about 6 degrees, 7 degrees, but is hardy here. It may defoliate if it goes below that, but it will survive because its trunk is subterranean, and so the growing point is always protected from the worst of the cold. So if you want a larger leaf plant, Sable Tamaulipas from Tamaulipas, Mexico is a great plant. And again, in sun, it'll get much larger than that. The question is, what is the plant on the right? That is an excellent question. It's a nomen nudum in Latin terms, which means it's called Sable blackburniana, but no one really knows what that is. You cannot trace it back to a origin in the wild. There's no original collection data, and so it's been sold as blackburniana, but nobody knows really. They don't know where it comes from or what it is. So it's a plant with a name. That's all I can say.
Has it grown much? Has it grown much? I mean, I don't know when it was planted, how much it has grown.
It's a slower growing plant. Some trees have been taken out and it's now getting more sun, which is helping it fill out. But that's been there 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so the trunk will never...
It's slowly forming a trunk.
Okay.
Now I've seen what they call blackburniana, but the problem is there's so much variation in what people are trying to say is blackburniana. Some of them look like sable palmetto, some of them don't look like sable palmetto. And so I just have to ask you to forgive me, but we're going to have to move on past that, because if you study it, you'll get as confused as everybody. I mean, you cannot narrow it down to what it is. It's impossible, or somebody would have done it. Nobody can figure it out.
But this is not for sale?
No, that is not. Several Sable Miners collected from North Carolina are for sale. So we have them from, I'm going to forget the locations, Emerald Isle, for example. That's one that's for sale here. There are minor variations within them, but you're going to see the same thing, a flat leaf with very few phyllophores, and a plant that, in 100 years it might get a little trunk, but generally not. Okay. We're gonna walk past the noisy greenhouses where you can purchase plants. And just take a short loop through here. When you're designing your garden, you stop and take different looks. Each perspective, it changes as you move. And what I love are long views. So where you're standing here, if you stand here, you have a winding path that comes through. You got a native Rhipidophyllum hystrix needle palm right here on your left. The path curves. You got a little Sable Miner in front of the bamboo, Fargesia there, and then on the right another Rhipidophyllum hystrix. And it's just gorgeous. From here through the evergreens right through there, that could be your garden, and it's going to be like that year round. You can have little things bloom in between, but that's a view to look at. Don't fall in the water, and we're gonna actually walk across the water in a minute. But this is another landscape view that you can have. If we had a bench right here, just look around you. You have evergreen plants all around you, and the palms behind you, the bamboos, palms again, bamboos, and Trachycarpus fortunii up toward the canopy. Along through here, more native palms, including one that's there on the left getting a bit of shade, and we'll talk about that next. That's Sable Birmingham. That's like Black Burniana. No one knows the origin of it, except that it was first identified growing in a botanic garden in Birmingham, Alabama. So it got the name. It does form a trunk. If it had more sun than that, it would be getting a trunk, but it's under a lot of evergreen canopy, and then in the summer deciduous canopy, so it doesn't get the sun it needs. But if you hear of Sable Birmingham, it's a good one to have. If you don't like walking across water, you can go up to the left. And we have another nice Trachycarpus fortunii growing here in the woodland. And I'm taking you to the tallest trunked needle palm Rhipidophyllum hystrix that I know of, and it's right here at Juniper Level Botanic Garden. You'll not have to ask why it got the name needle palm once you see this one right here. So the reason it has its needles is that it's to protect the heart of the palm, the pith of the palm, from black bears and before they went extinct, probably ground sloths. The inflorescence is kept within the needles, and unlike the sable fruit, which is on a long branch and hanging way out where the deer and the bear and the birds can eat it, the fruit of this plant is kept right in there amongst the needles. So, and it smells like old cheese maybe, or some people describe it as really bad gym socks. And so it's not meant to attract birds. Birds don't smell well, and generally it's kept near the ground, so it's meant to attract mammals, including the black bear. But the palm doesn't want the black bear going in, you know, once it starts getting hungry, eating the fruit by scraping it out. It doesn't want it to go in and attack the pith of the palm the way the black bears can do to sable palms. So that's one reason they think they have this tremendous defense mechanism in those needles. But this is native to South Carolina, and it's extremely cold hardy. The reason it hasn't come to North Carolina, just imagine it. The only thing really moving its seeds from one place to another are mammals, raccoons, maybe bears. But the sables, they have all kinds of animals helping them. Bears, raccoons, deer, birds. And so they've been able to move northward much faster when the Ice Age ended than needle palm. So even though it's not here yet, it's perfectly happy here. We just have to give it a hand. And our tour is about to end, but not before you see an extremely rare palm about to flower. So this is Trachycarpus nanus. This is an adult specimen. It's not going to get much bigger than this. It's related to the Trachycarpus fortunii, which you can see at the end there. And right here is what's called a flower space, and it has two of them.
Oh my goodness.
And so this will be its first flowering here in North Carolina. And this is the only one that I know of. It's here at Juniper Level Botanic Garden. The other thing is that the Trachycarpus fortunii and the other species, they tend to have, each plant is either male or female. They can have a few flowers that are either. So it'll be interesting to find out whether this is going to be a pollen donor or a pollen acceptor. And we'll have to see if Tony Event can find another plant with which to cross-pollinate it. But yeah, I just wanted you to see that. It's extremely rare, a very beautiful example, and the first one, the flower here. So very nice. And that concludes our tour, except for one little thing.